I distrust identity politics. I see this causing a tribal, divisive, and polarizing political environment which is ripping us apart. And if we're going to succeed in these pluralistic societies, we need people with different identities to agree. But how are we going to do this with the use of identity politics? How are we going to fight discrimination with discrimination? And how are we going to be able to speak our truth if one is afraid of having an opinion based on your identity? Unfortunately, I see this current use of identity politics causing damage to our society right now. I don't know if you heard about the Rotherham scandal in the UK, but basically from late 1980s to 2010, over 1,400 rape and sexual assault cases happened in this period. The child victims tried to report these cases to over 100 local police authorities, but the fear of potentially being labeled racist made the police look the other way. So the perpetrator's ethnicity, mostly from Asia, made the police and local authorities not dare to address these situations. When I heard about this, I struggled to grasp with the fact that this fear was really the reason, but in most cases it was. So if we cannot call out child sexual abuse in this current political environment with the potential risk of being labeled racist, well, then we have a problem. We need to be able to discuss sensitive issues such as racism, police brutality, inequality, globalization, migration, and gender, for example, without being afraid of having an opinion based on an arbitrary identity. Regardless of your skin color, class, or gender, you should be able to participate in discussing these sensitive issues. Unfortunately, this is not what I see in this current political environment. Let's briefly look at some examples. So I've been observing debates around gender differences. And what I noticed was that people who argued that there are certain biological differences between a man and a woman was then automatically categorized as either discriminating against women, supporting the patriarchy, or being gender biased. Why? Not because of their opinion or argument, but their identity. I struggle with this as the ethical and political answer is clear. Everyone should have the same opportunities, of course. But it shouldn't stop us to be able to discuss biology soberly and not politicize the issue with the use of identity politics. Also been observing debates around accurate use of gender pronoun. And I think first of all, we can all agree that discrimination based on gender identity is awful and wrong. But what I saw was that people who agreed on the issue but argued against a specific proposed solution was then judged based on their identity. So people who agreed on the issue argued against a specific solution from the most oppressed identity, then your identity was being used against you as an argument. And with this argumentation, how can people with different identities be able to gather around certain social facts, which is essential for our society to function together, if we use our identity differences against each other? I do not understand. Also, in terms of discussing police brutality in our society as a whole, I noticed that certain identities are viewed less credible to have an opinion. But on questions like, how many people got shot? Who shot them? What was the color on their skin? How many people died? What was the color on their skin? Is the only way to understand this to have a specific identity? Can one say, me as a white man or me as a black man, I know X, Y, and Z on this topic? I say no. And if you think so, it could be a problem. When discussing something like violence in our society as a whole, identity or your identity aren't often relevant. But this is not to say that a person's life experience is never relevant. It clearly is, and it's affecting us all. For example, it can be used to falsify certain claims. Like if someone say, Catholics don't believe in hell. And you can say, no, my mom is a Catholic and she believes in hell. So if someone make a statement about a group which you happen to be part of, you might very well be in a position to falsify this claim based on your experience. But in most cases, discussing facts and data, your identity aren't really relevant. We need to be able to gather around certain social facts, which goes beyond gender, beyond skin color, and beyond class. And these needs to be challenged, discussed, and argued, and potentially improved. If you use or view everything through the lenses of identity, we will not be able to solve any of these issues, sensitive issues, together. So if you're going to use identity politics, how does it work? Well, it's all based about in-group realities. And each identity group has its own reality which nobody else can understand. This is what we hear so often. You can't understand X because you have this specific skin color. Or you cannot understand Y because you're not a woman or you're not a man. But if you fragment the population into this in-group, this fragmentation could go all the way down to the individual, which is why I say we should judge people individually, not by this constructed in-group. Unfortunately, I see this ideology manifested in the millennial generation. For example, here at universities, it should be a safe space for thought, not a safe space from thought. Universities should be a place where you hear contradictory views to current views. They're actually the only people who can teach you something you don't already know, which is why we should appreciate this diversity of thought, not limit it. But when we start to use strong words like supporting the patriarchy, discriminating against women, gender biased, I might add racist, white supremacist, Islamophobic, and Nazi, which, without a shadow of doubt, are real big issues in our society. But by throwing these strong words around to people who slightly disagree with you, these words will lose meaning. We've got to be able to use them accurately and precisely. For example, against the identitarian movement in Europe and North America, I would argue. But by throwing them around to anyone who slightly disagrees with you, these words will lose meaning. For example, today, in this current political environment, two public intellectuals, Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, are labeled white supremacist and even Nazi tendencies. I found this interesting, as Ben Shapiro is an Orthodox Jew. I've not heard of any Orthodox Jews being Nazi as well. But hey, in this political environment, everything seems possible. And it's important for me to clarify that this current use of identity politics is being used on both political sides. For example, the rhetoric being used on the alt-right, with the Muslim ban by Trump, what the Home Affairs Minister in Australia said about only accepting white farmers. What type of suggestion is this? Or what the intolerant left, particularly strong on universities, for example in Evergreen College, forcing white people not to be in school on a specific day, or having dorms just for specific skin color, or having places with no white people. This doesn't seem to be the solution either. So what is the solution? Well, we need to be able to try to find places we can build cross-cultural bridges, which goes beyond gender, beyond skin color, and beyond class. This is the only way our interconnected and globalized generation will be able to solve any of these difficult issues together. Do not limit people's view through their identity. Do not hold people hostage by their born identity. Judge people's character and content, not the color of their skin. But I know these are all very difficult and sensitive issues with strong historical luggage, which is important to understand and acknowledge. But if we go back and use identity differences, it will not bring progress. It will only further fuel this polarizing environment which we see hurting our political discourse today. This is why I urge you not to play this identity politics game, whether you're on the left or right. Thank you.